want to welcome you all once again to session 4. That's called Quit Denying Anger, Sadness, and Fear. So glad you're here. So as we begin, Jerry, why don't you give us a bit of background. How did this quit come about?
Because I had been, I think, suppressing my emotions all those years, and actually was unaware that I was even doing that, I became very aware that I had certain rules against these emotions, and I had to begin to think, well, where did these rules come from? And so I would learn how important our emotions are to our personhood. And anything that was important to me, being a full person, I knew I really needed to pay attention to. And this became important to me because so much of my Christianity, I had put certain emotions as off limits. They're bad. And so, they're not only are they not bad, they're crucial. They're crucial to me and my humanity, and they're crucial to me in my following Christ, because I cannot love well. I can only love well to the extent that I really do embrace all my emotions.
Okay, so what do you think these unhealthy attitudes come from, about anger, sadness, and fear? I mean, you probably could say that, we almost would say there's sin, to get away from. So what do you think that unhealthy perspective on these three particular emotions came from?
Yeah, these really needed to be highlighted because they get a really bad rap. I think normally our families, our churches, and our culture consider certain feelings bad. They're bad, they're off limits, and even sometimes sinful. The anger, the sadness, and the fear. But there is no bad emotion. There is no emotion that is bad, that is naughty. The problem, if we believe that, which a lot of people do even unconsciously, they don't even realize it, then you won't allow yourself to feel them. And that's a real problem, spiritually, physically, emotionally. So there's no bad emotion. They're difficult. The only way I describe them is difficult. There are certain emotions that are more difficult to experience than other emotions, but every emotion is important and is crucial, and we're given every emotion for a reason.
So, for example, some families, you can't be angry, or maybe women can't be angry, or children can't be angry.
Or only certain persons in the family can be angry.
Or, my family, we didn't do sadness in my family. We did anger, yelling and screaming, but we didn't do sadness. The crybabies, you sad, and fear was minimized or ignored altogether. And then our culture, I mean, we minimize certain emotions. We deny sadness, pain. We suppress it. We repress it. We medicate ourselves to get away from feeling badly or about ourselves. We get busy so we don't have to feel certain things. And then, of course, churches are just very confused often because of again, we would say a theology that's just not, it's not broad, it's not fully biblical, it's narrow. So Jerry likes to call them not bad emotions, but difficult emotions. And they're difficult because we're not used to dealing with them. We're not used to processing them before God and before each other. So I know for me at least, it was very significant to begin seeing in Scripture how much is said about these emotions. So, for example, 2/3 of the Psalms are called laments, or griefs before God, 2/3. You got a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. I mean, a whole book about lamenting and grieving before God. We've got the life of Jesus. We see the full breadth of anger and sadness and joy in Jesus, grieving in Gethsemane, for example. And yet, here I was as a Christian many, many years. I didn't do those emotions. They were like bad and wrong. Mm-hmm. So, Jerry, why would you say it's so imperative that we don't deny anger, sadness, or fear? Because you use that word imperative a lot about that.
Yeah. There's a lot of consequences to not feeling your emotions. Okay, number one, unprocessed emotions don't die. They get buried alive. They're living in you. And God created us in such a way, we know this biologically, neurologically, physiologically, emotionally, we're created to have our feelings go somewhere. Okay, so if you don't have your feelings, they will have you. They have to go somewhere. They were made to go somewhere. We want them to go to the right place, which is, we want to take them into our head and our heart, pay attention to them, think about them, and then we'll know what to do with them. But unprocessed emotions will either, if you don't process them, they'll stay in your body. And they'll turn into an illness. Most physical illnesses have their roots in unprocessed emotion. So high blood pressure, strokes, et cetera, you name it. And then of course, or they'll turn into a depression, or they'll stay in there and you'll suppress them, and then they'll implode, and you're exploding on someone. So number one, unprocessed emotions they're destructive and they're dangerous. But number two, we want to pay attention to these emotions because you can't have healthy community without them. How can I know you if I don't know myself? How's the world supposed to know us by our love if we don't even know ourselves?
How can I know you if you don't know you?
Well, yeah, right. How can I know you if I don't even know myself? So it's important that part of knowing yourself is knowing what's going on inside of you. Knowing when you're angry and what's behind the anger and what do I do with that, etc. So that's another important part. We don't want to be a pretend community or superficial community. We want to be an authentic community. Thirdly, though, we have to become aware of our family rules around these emotions. You can't change what you're not aware of. And so if you're not aware of how your family did these emotions, then that's what lives in you. Even though you're a Christian and you go to church and you've been in the church, 20 years, most likely the way you do emotions is the way your family did them. Unless you've become aware of that and it's different than the biblical way, and now you say, okay, I'm going to change it. So, for example, many of us might have grown up with the family rule, anger is bad. That isn't true. And so I have to actually, change. I have to change that rule in my own mind and heart that anger isn't bad. Now, anger is scary if we saw it handled irresponsibly in our families, and maybe some of us did. But and we have to learn how to process anger in healthy ways. But again, what was your family's rules about those things, and they need to change. And then finally, these emotions are important. Every emotion is important because God comes to us through our emotions. A lot of how I discern God's voice is by paying attention to me. Yes, God comes to me through Scripture. Yes, God comes to me through open and closed doors. Yes, He comes to me through the creation. But one of the most significant ways that God comes to me and you is through ourselves. He comes to me through me. How do I think about something? How do I feel about it? So, for example, I realized I would have great sadness around living in New York City. And so what do I do with that sadness? I said, Lord, what do I do with this? And how are you coming to me? For the first 7 years of living in New York, I just suppressed it because I didn't think good Christians should be sad. The joy of the Lord is my strength. And I would just stuff it. But now I've learned to pay attention to know when I'm sad and then ask, how are you coming to me through this? And I realized that I am not an urban person by nature. Oh, I love wide open spaces. I love water. I love the mountains. And that's how my spirit gets nurtured. And so I have chosen to live in New York City, and that's my choice. But I need to build in ways that I get to nature to honor and respect myself. But I had to learn to pay attention to that sadness. But that's true of anything. I pay attention to the anger. Is this sin, or is God, telling me that someone's crossed my boundaries and I need to speak to them? What's the anger about? What's the fear about? There is so much fodder for transformation if we will pay attention to our feelings and ask, God, how are you coming to me through them?
That's great. That's great. If you ever get a chance, you want to look up Ignatius of Loyola in the 1500s. He did tremendous work on how God comes through our emotions, through consolations and desolations. So fantastic. Thank you, Jerry. So with that, I want to invite you to go to your workbooks, where you're going to look at how your family dealt with these emotions, as well as a brief inventory, and get yourself started. So thank you. Enjoy.